Thank you, David. I feel like I hardly deserve that nice introduction. I came in late. I've got kids. It's the end of the school year. And I don't know if anybody has said it yet, but I just wanted to express how much I appreciate this venue, this forum. Telling stories is a very old way of communicating. We don't get much chance to do it here in the modern world. And thank you for giving us the opportunity. I also wanted to thank Mrs. Eileen Roddy. Eileen, are you out there? Oh, come on, Eileen. Somebody got that. Well, wherever you are, thank you. One, for the work you gave to my company. I hope your birch trees are doing well with all this rain. Two, for the Seamus Heaney poetry, great Irish poet. And I believe I agree with you. Those are probably the saddest lines ever written in English. Home about his brother. Thirdly, thank you for the lesson in Irish history and the history of my family name for reasons that should become clear rather soon. I don't know much about my genealogy, so therefore it pains me very deeply to say that I am going to take your unique voice and character, and I'm going to combine it with two, maybe three other people I've known in my life, and maybe some characters from some movies. I'm going to take that voice and I'm going to curse with it. I am going to bring up what the great American poet J. Cole would call whole bloodlines of trauma, which are uncomfortable. I'm sorry. And I'm going to speak ill of English people, and I am going to outright blaspheme the Catholic Church. But worse than that, I'm going to take your beautiful Irish brogue and I'm going to make a hash of it. But you'll understand, it's in the service of the story. All right. So I'm standing around after the job with Mrs. Roddy, and she says something that sounds like, again, I apologize for this, but, I see from your card you're at Thames. Thames is from the green and rugged shores of the County Cork in Southern Ireland. I say, yeah, I'd heard that was true of my family. She'd say, you're a funny lot, Thames is. You're neither Church of England, and you damn sure aren't Catholics. Sort of like Irish Presbyterians. But when someone says you're Thames in Ireland, forgive me, my son, it sort of means you're a pain in the to everyone. When I thought of my father, I thought, yeah, it seems about right. And she said, "Hand, you're a bunch of She wanted to say a bad word here, but Mrs. Roddy is a classy lady, and she didn't. She said, "You're a bunch of tankers." I was like, "Tinkers, Mrs. Roddy? What's a tinker?" And her voice went up a couple octaves, and it was like she was talking to somebody standing over here. And she said something like, tinkers. What's to know what a tinker is, does he? Well, I'll tell you what a tinker is, all right. When I was a guard on the farm, a long time ago, these folk used to come around in the summer, and they're driving these big drafty caravans. You'd call it a wagon, being pulled by dodgy horses. And they've got their wares all on the side, like pots and pans, like. And they come offering to, for instance, paint your barn. Sometimes they paint your barn, and they tell you a great story. Maybe not strictly speaking a true story, right? But it's a good story. They paint your barn. And other times, they punch your husband in the nose and they steal your sister. That's what a fucking tinker is. And this really makes sense to me, knowing my father. At the the time that most of the story takes place, he plied a trade as an itinerant painter up and down Ekrin and Ragachar on the west coast of this country. We worked an area roughly between Santa Cruz to the south, sometimes Portland, Oregon to the north, when the spirit moved in. We went only as far inland as the fog went, and he drove a wagon. It was a station wagon with wood paneling on the side. Actually, it was a series of station wagons, but they always had ladders tied to the top, buckets of paint in the back. Sometimes the wheels were different sizes, the tires were bald, the brakes had to be feathered just so. He had no phone number, no phone, no card, very little repeat business, and quite often no driver's license. So from the time, just about when I was the legal driving age, maybe a little bit before, I drove this wagon. We traveled typically along the roads of the coast that hugged the sea, cliffs that fell into the blue ocean. We traveled the back roads, the neon nights, and we worked for people quite often who were from other countries and really weren't too concerned when a large red man wearing dress slacks he had cut off about to here and wearing sandals he had made himself from old tires walked into their businesses and said something like, "I'd like to tell you a story and do some business with you." The path that had brought my father here to the west coast of this country, telling stories, painting barns and gentlemen's clubs, and many other things, was a long story. And I thought about telling it in a normal way, a discursive way. I think I timed myself and it was 48 minutes. It also sounded like every cliche you've ever heard about being Irish. So, lucky for all you folks out there, I happened to be reading some very good poetry at the time. And I must say another thanks to a Megan Kaminsky, if you're in the audience. Thank you for reminding me what distances a poem can travel when it puts on its 7-league boots and it jumps over continents of longing and joy. And so I made a poem instead of a narrative about the history of Ireland as I know it and my family's history. The poem is called Mary. Picture this. One buck-naked Gaelic brave, painted cobalt blue from here to here to here. He stands with his spear planted in the land. Across a green field, a legion of legionnaires, their archers. And as he raises that spear, Gbrah, and begins to run across that field toward their finest warriors, and the points hitting here and here and here and here, he thinks something grand like, what the fuck is the matter with these people? Bless you. And then, collateral bedlam of British Empire building. They punk you off your land. They punk you into that let's grow potatoes only game. They punk you into indentured bond servitude. They punk you into famine, punk you to the new world. They say, the only place your grandchildren will find your name, Paddy Timms, is on the register of prison ships. Bitch. And you become railroad builders, yes. Broad-shouldered hog butchers, thank you, William. And you become buglers, soldiers, mercenaries, punking other people off their lands. You become hustlers, bucksters, pimps, child molesters, fools, and you, that rarest kind of girl, with your brown eyes and your red hair. How you fell in love with that other brown-eyed girl. You know the one, the singer, who sings her liquid soulless song to so many brilliant people, single moms. Yes, that girl, Whiskey, who wanted her company so badly that you tied him to the radiator, the only place solid enough. Chicago, late September 1941, and the day grew cold. And because he was a little Irish boy, he became a ward of the archdiocese. No, the ancestors came down out of the hills then, shillelaghs in their eyes. The great-grandfather, rattling his war medal, said, "You'll take no flesh and blood of mine and put him in a fucking Catholic home." And that is how my father grew up in a Protestant orphanage north of the city. Very nice place, he said, as institutions go. It was a place, he always told me, that a boy got everything he needed, except for love. But it was a place, and the foster homes and the military boys' schools he later graduated to, those were places where there were many predatory fish. And my father learned, or maybe he carried on, the traditions of the gypsies, a simple three-part scheme for survival. As I drove our station wagon along the edges of the cliffs and carried paint buckets, he would explain to me this system for survival. The first part, learn how to tell a good story. My father would say, yeah, a good story should have talking animals, if possible, or children, if not. It should have a little bit of fighting and a little bit of romance. And if you could tell a good story, Danny, you could charm your way into a girl's heart. You can also talk your way out of a fight, and you can always get a job. If the story didn't work, the second strategy was run. My father had very muscular legs. He would say, look at these. They're your two best friends. Now, any guy who can beat the shit out of you is probably so big that he can't outrun you. No shame in that. Get away from him. If you're in a bad relationship or a bad job and you don't have a car and you can run a long ways, you're gone. Furthermore, son, if you learn to run with a certain grace and power and self-possession, say, on a football field, it prevents option number 3, which is punch. Use this one only in the worst of situations, say, when someone has you cornered in a basement, someone much bigger than you. And the right way to punch somebody is, first, pretend like you're not going to. Cower away. No. And then hit him with everything you got from the hips. Here, here, and here. And when you've hit him hard, go back to option 2. Run. And when you've run far enough away, find yourself something that makes you feel better. Not fucking whiskey. It's terrible stuff. My father never drank a drop, as far as I knew. Ice cream is good, he'd say. And he had a story he told me about how he would crawl through the air ducts at the orphanage where he grew up and sneak into the kitchen and eat a gallon of ice cream in the dark. Always makes you feel better, he said. My father employed all 3 of these techniques many times in the years that we traveled together. Those are other stories. He employed these techniques when he was in the military. Excuse me. Punched a sergeant in the nose for a reason that has never been clear to me. Tried to run away, spent his career in the stockade, and then, sort of in a 1,000,000-to-1 opportunity, talked his way into an honorable discharge. So these days, he lives in the Napa Valley Veterans Home in Yountville. It is a very nice place as institutions go. But his options have narrowed a little bit. He's had a series of strokes, and so his storytelling has ceased. He tends to sit watching warily as the world comes by. He has eaten a lot of ice cream in the intervening years, and it has led to diabetes. And they take first one toe, and then another toe, and then a foot. So he doesn't run anymore. He's down to one trick. I visited him on Thanksgiving, and I was talking to his doctors and his treatment team about, care options and what happens when. I was going down the hall to play dominoes with him in the rec room, and he stopped me. Excuse me. Does anybody have a spare drink?
Give somebody.
Is this so? Go a little bit.
One.
All yours. Appreciate it. It's not whiskey, is it? No. You don't have cooties? So I was walking down the hall with him, and he kind of turned to me in the middle of it and said, "Hey, Danny, you remember going to church when you were a kid?" We went to a Presbyterian church. And I said, "Yeah, Dad, I remember that." And he said, "You remember what you learned about the afterlife and your soul?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, Dad." He said, "Well, I think that's all a bunch of fucking bullshit. I want you to get these people to keep me alive as long as possible. Fight till the fucking end of it." Thank you. And I said, "Dad, can I go get you an Eskimo pie or something?" Well, it wasn't much later. My dad calls me 4 or 5 times a day. Usually he's complaining about his nurses and he's telling me how he'd like to go fishing again. Happened that it was early in the morning, and as luck would have it, I was loading dodgy horses onto a caravan. It was a Christmas parade here in Lawrence. And it was early in the morning. These horses really, they didn't want to be loaded onto a trailer. And if they could have, they would have talked their way out of it. But they can't talk, except with their eyes. And their great silent eyes were looking at me, saying something like, "I'd like to run, and I think I might have to kick you in the head. But what I wonder is, can I trust you, lad, to be not only kind to me, but consistent?" Excuse me. I'm not quite Jameson, but... So I was striving to be kind and consistent with these horses, and my phone was ringing. My dad was calling me. I could see the number from the hospital, and I was like, "Shit, not now, Dad." But finally, when I let the horses back out into the field, and he ran away, I picked up the phone, called the number back. It was not my dad. It was one of his nurses, and he was pissed off. Which is not unusual. He said, "Your dad had a massive stroke this morning and he died. And because of the directive on the paperwork, I beat him and I shocked him and I beat him and I brought him back to life. And then he died again. And because I was told to do so, I beat him till his ribs broke. And I shocked him. I beat him. And he came back again for a little bit. And then he died. I beat him, and I beat him, and I shocked him. And he came back to life." He said, "Would you please," and he wanted to cuss here. He said, "Would you please change the the directive to a DNR so that he can die with dignity. And I don't know why I said this, but I said, what do you think the odds are that you can keep him alive until I fly from Kansas to California? And he said, 1 in a million. Oh, my dad beat those odds. I got out there and he was still alive.
Wow.
But he wasn't really alive. He wouldn't wake up. He'd been without oxygen a long time. And I made the decision pretty quickly when I saw him that his fight was the fight he had with that nurse on the table. And that it was time. He wouldn't run and fight anymore. So I talked with my family, I talked with the doctors, and I said, so when you unhook him from the machine, how long does that take? And the doctor, who had gone to the same college that I had gone to, very nice guy, said, oh, I don't know, 5 minutes. I've seen some people go 5 days. And knowing my father, I expected him to go 6. So I prepared myself. I knew some trails in the hills above the hospital, and I went for a long run there, kind of early spring in California. And then I went, there's a nice restaurant across the street from the hospital, and I had a steak and a big bowl of ice cream. And then I had a whiskey for myself. And then I had a whiskey for my grandmother, Mary, and all the shit she must have gone through. And then I got a good, thick book, and I sat down by my father. And before I started reading the book, I told him what I needed to tell him. I told him how much I had enjoyed driving those shitty station wagons along the edges of cliff, and sometimes fishing for our dinner in the sea. And then I read that book. And then the nurse, another nurse, nice lady, brought me some romance novels. And I started reading those. They weren't as good. And I got tired. And there was a little alcove next to the bed. And I thought, I'll just lie down there for a couple minutes, rest my eyes. Because it could take 5-6 days. And as I laid down there and sleep started to come, I had this memory which kind of turned into a dream. I remember being about 10 years old, and my dad and I were doing a job, and it was painting the inside of a warehouse, kind of like this, with a high ceiling. And my father had brought his scaffolding on the station wagon, and he set it up. It was 3 stories of scaffolding to get up to the top and paint the beams. And for some reason, he was doing it at night. Didn't surprise me. So I went to fetch a bucket of paint, and the only problem was that my father he set the scaffolding up, but he had lost the pins somewhere, the right cotter pins to hold it up, and he used some wires and some sticks. He was up there painting, and I heard this sound, this kind of sound, and the scaffolding was coming apart at the base. The wire was popping off, and there he was at the top, and he heard the sound too. And it was a beautiful thing. He jumped from the top scaffolding to the second, and he changed directions and he jumped to the next one. And then he jumped and he hit the ground running, and the scaffolding came down, the whole tower of it behind him, and he outran it, straight outran it. And as my memory turned into a dream, he just kept right on running out into the night.